Welcome to the Futurist Society podcast, where we delve into the latest advancements in technology, science, and culture. The Futurist Society is your window into all of the awesomeness that the future holds.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Futurist Society, where as always we are talking in the present, but talking about the future. A very special guest today. The name is Steve Swan. He is a thought leader in the biotech space and CEO and founder of the Swan Group. He also has a podcast called Biotech Bites, and we're going to be talking about biotech today. I'm in the center of biotech, Kendall Square, and I love all the different advancements and technological breakthroughs that are happening in biotech. So Steve is going to give us his insight into how that is playing out for the future and what that holds for you guys at home. So Steve, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into this, and a little bit about what you're doing right now.
Sure. Thanks for having me. So how did I get into this? So I went to school in Boston. Love Boston. Anyway, I'm an executive recruiter and I focus on the technology side of biotech, right? So I've been doing this 26 years. Got into the business because my mother started doing it 50 plus years ago, right? And, as time's been going by, in the recent past, it's just moving so quickly. But the technology that, that's out there or that's coming is just changing everything so rapidly for everybody, involved. And I just got enamored with the tech, the AI, the data, what it's doing for the industry, both on the research and on the commercial side of things, and just continue to, help all these different thousands and thousands of biotechnology companies, which are in our country, and a lot of them up your way, right? To help find those awesome leaders, or to help them really think through what they need in their leaders or what they need in their technology based on where they are in their life cycle, based on what they need, coming down the road and where they think they're going, so it's been fun. It's been really exciting.
So first question that I wanted to ask you is that a lot of people in my field in medicine will make this transition to biotech. And just from a purely selfish perspective, how does one do that? I know that you're actually looking at recruiting. Are you also looking at people that don't have a biotech background, or is it something that you really have to start early and get kind of groomed into this field?
So I think you have to start early and get groomed into the field. It's one of those things where, how do you get it if you don't have it, right? That's kind of the base of it. But I'll tell you, the folks that are in medicine, I'll go back to your, where you started your comment there. The folks that are the scientists that are the ones that find these companies, right? Because they're the ones that have their molecule or their therapy or whatever, and then they start finding their company. They really look for the folks, even in IT. You'd be surprised, that have at least a master's, if not a PhD, on the science side. Is that overkill? Maybe, but you can't convince them of that, right? Because they want folks that are like them. They're scientists, and they're trained scientists, and they're credentialed scientists. Even if you are only doing the technology work, you still need to really understand. You need to not only walk and talk like a duck, you should have been a duck, right? And now you've gotten a lot of these guys and girls, what they do is they get into IT because, quite frankly, they don't think IT is getting it done for them. So they're scientists and they're doing their thing, and I'm just going to make something up. Maybe they had an issue with some of their data and maybe collating it or this or that. They're like, you know what, IT, I got this. I can do this on my own. And then they start doing it. And then everybody on the science side says, hey, dude, you just did that. Can you do that for me? Next thing they know, their whole domain's growing now. They got 3 people doing different, so that's what ends up happening. That's how things grew. And that's sort of a function that I helped Regeneron build out a bunch of years ago, where they had the same need and the same wants, and it did the scientists.
Yeah. But what about the whole idea of being a startup, right? Like I feel like when I think about biotech, there's 2 camps. You have these large companies like Pfizer and, Moderna. And then you have a lot of startups that are happening specifically here in Kendall Square. And like, if I was, I'm a surgeon, and if I have an idea for something, how does one go about starting a company? Like, it's not like a software company where you build out the software and then you just try to sell it. It's very different, correct?
Well, it's really different. Yeah. Well, what your issue is going to be is you can have like you just said, any company, whether it's software or whatever, you got to have a great idea, right? And clearly conviction in your idea. The next real big step is getting others to see your vision. And the reason you're doing that is to get funding and to get money. And there's either you're going to end up getting a CFO or a fractional CFO that's got experience taking folks public or getting that funding, or you're going to work with companies like a Danforth. Danforth Advisors works with on the finance side with biotech. They're from Boston. They're out of Boston, and but they've got tentacles everywhere. San Francisco and such, and they just have folks that work with these companies on the finance side to help them get that funding and help them get the financing they need, because it takes a ton of money, and you're probably aware of this. It takes a ton of money to get you all the way through, your clinical trials, getting your patients, so on and so forth. I remember speaking to a guy in a PE firm, and he said, when I talk to somebody who tells me they have funding to get 90% of the way there, he said, I say to them, well, that's great. If you had enough water to get 90% of the way across the desert, you're still not making it. They want to hear you got enough money to get 120% of the way across, So that's the real key. And that's what's changed, quite honestly, Doc, in the last 3 years, the funding and the financing, because rates spiked so quick. And it was such a shock to the whole investment world, but biotech in particular. A lot of the things that really weren't going to make it got smoked out. But back then, you only had to promise your money, your lenders, your money folks, a couple percent. Now you got to promise them 12% ish or something. And so that smoked out a lot of the companies. So that smoked out a lot of those ideas, and probably a good thing,
Mm-hmm. What?
So.
I mean, maybe I'm not sure if it's a good thing. Like I think about the past presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, and he had this like extreme upswing with buying I think FDA approved drugs and then marketing them differently. And I within the course of like five years, he took a company with zero income and it became a multi-million-dollar company, which is that traditional story that you hear in like Silicon Valley or something like that. And from my perspective, I always hear about how difficult that is to do in biotech, but then you also hear of stories that people are doing that. So I guess, from your perspective, like, how does that happen? Number one. And also number two is like, is that now not possible with the amount of funding being so different?
I'll answer that in reverse. I think the amount of funding is, to your point, yeah, there is a lot of funding. There's a lot of folks chasing those kinds of things. They saw what he did and they were like, hey, we could do this too. I had the pleasure of, I worked with that company. I placed a bunch of folks at that company, at Roivant, right? They have all their different events. And I'm still in touch with a whole bunch of those folks. And in 2017, 2016, they called me and they were doing what they called their pipeline day. And he spoke. I was in this auditorium with 100 people, never knew who he was. I'm looking at this guy going, this guy's like 35. Like, he is awesome. I called my office. I go, can you do some homework on this guy? It's just incredible, just amazing. So he had all his different CEOs get up there and speak from his different Vants, his different organizations, and they were all seasoned vets. And, he would take something literally off the scrap heap, right? And, buy it from Pfizer for a couple $100 million or whatever, get funding on that, and then sell it back to him for several billion, and then he ended up selling 10% of his Sumitomo to, 10% of Sumito, of his company to Sumitomo, creating Sumito for a few $billion. So yeah, he had a unique model, and he took those molecules that they left for dead or they didn't think were worthwhile, and he would take it all the way through the research process and get it commercialized and make it a viable product. So how that happened was just, in my opinion, I think that some of these large organizations, which is where some of those compounds and molecules that he was going after, just didn't see them as something they wanted to put some money into. They didn't see the ROI, where clearly he did, and it worked for him. some of those big players are so big that it's they're more supply chain, they're more commercial. You know what I mean? And so
Mm.
as they're running around hunting and looking for smaller targets, so lots of times they overpay because they all get in a bidding war, for these different companies because they have to buy their pipeline. They're not really building. They're not making them now because they're so big. They're so big. They need to keep that supply chain and that commercial process alive, right? So they need things to push through it, and they probably didn't see these drugs that he picked up as big enough for their machine, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how
Mm-hmm.
that happened. I think they fell through the cracks, and he had has some smart people working for him, and they could really get through it. And they were really, really big. They took a revolutionary approach where we got involved with them was they had this whole concept of digital innovation. His CIO was awesome, an MIT guy, and still talk to him, still text him. And they built out a lot of different models for data science and analytics on everything. They were building it for HR, supply chain, finance, discovery, before anybody was doing that. And we're talking, like I said, 2017-ish, and people were just starting to think about that then, and they applied a lot of technology to what they were doing and it worked well for them.
Mm-hmm. I guess my question to you is that Cinderella story atypical, and is it possible right now in the field, or is it
I think it's
just
possible right now. Yes, I do think it's possible. Other companies are doing it. They have been doing it. They have data science. Data's huge. I mean, there's no way around that right now, and to process all the data that all these companies have and to do it, accurately and profitably, is gigantic for them. And it's been a matter of the data that we've had is real structured kind of data, so it's you got to make it digestible for the technology that we have. That's been changing real rapidly. That changes every several weeks. I mean, there's so many different kinds of unstructured data, some of your x-rays, some of your images that you have, right? As a doctor, as a surgeon, they can take those and ingest it and use those in their analysis. So it was novel then. It became more commonplace, and it's real commonplace now, what they did and what they're doing. But it's making everybody faster and smarter. Rising tides raise all boats, right? So it's making everybody real much faster and much smarter today. And now we can focus on some higher level problems, whatever's coming down the road.
what do you think that those problems are? What do you think are the higher level
Well,
problems?
I think the next thing that we're into and what we're doing now is a lot of the gene therapy, right? These companies are getting into, taking your DNA and making a therapy personalized for you, and there's really only a handful, well, 30 of them, right? Roughly 30 of them approved here in the US, something like that. And I'm sure there's many, many more on the back burner, but I think that's the next one, the big one. The Achilles heel for those folks. I mean, the science is great. The therapies are great. The responses that these, patients are getting are just phenomenal. But the manufacturing is kind of the problem because they have manufacturing scientists, right? So they can only really make it's manufacturing / lab, right? They can only make one batch at a time. One person makes one batch. It's not like a real factory where they're, I don't know, mass producing cars or pills or whatever. They're making one batch at a time, which, I mean, they should go slow, but that's really kind of the Achilles heel in the industry. Like I said, it's a manufacturing and a production sort of thing. But I think that's where we're going. I think that's what we're doing, and I think it's great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe last year that they cured sickle cell anemia, and that was such an amazing breakthrough. It kind of flew underneath the radar for a bit.
Yeah.
But then, talking to people in the industry, they were just so impressed with it. And I remember Saturday Night Live did a skit about it. I mean, it's like a biotech, it's a biotech breakthrough that really got people really excited about what the future has to hold.
Yeah.
And I guess my question to you is, like, what else do you see like that's coming down the pipeline that human beings are going to experience that might be that powerful?
Well, I mean, what a lot of companies got into in COVID time, right? Because during COVID, you remember, we couldn't do anything. We were locked down, and that shut down our industry. Why did it shut down our industry? Because clinical trials, right? So clinical trials were all locked up. People were scared to go out of their house. They couldn't, to do a clinical trial to whether they're drawing blood, whether you got to go get a compound, whatever it is, they have to control all those things in the experiment, right? So it's got to be administered the same way. They couldn't do this stuff remote. So what I started seeing a lot during COVID was the need for wearables, right? And things like that. And I think that wearables are giving us, or giving scientists, giving these companies the ability to, really figure out, what's going on, how's this affecting us, and things like that. Before it was go into the lab, we'll take your blood pressure at this time. They can monitor all that stuff now, man. They can monitor it remote, and I think that that's great for some people don't like the whole privacy issue on it, and that's a whole separate issue. But I think it's awesome. And I think that the push was really made at that time, to use these things. I mean, you got Dexcom out in San Diego. They have glucose monitors, right? That hook up to your phone, and you couldn't do that even months ago. You couldn't do that, and now that's all going to hook into your Oura Ring, maybe your Garmin watch, right? With your sleep and all that stuff. You're getting your own 360-degree view as opposed to the companies or companies just getting that. So I think this is all really awesome stuff. And then maybe with all these variables, we can see different things coming down the road before we even know we have it, whatever, some sort of ailment. So I think that's where we're going. And I think, I think we're there, right?
Yeah. I mean, listen, like all that stuff that you're talking about, I'm personally doing. Like I'm very much into hacking my own health. Like I just ordered my own blood glucose monitor. I have 2 different Apple Watches so that like as soon as I put one down and put the other one on, so I'm never without so I'm tracking my calories, I'm tracking my workouts. I want to live to be 120. So I'm trying to.
So here's I'm about to hit a tangent. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
120 kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna have a problem with retirement, with money, with Social Security and 401k. So I don't know. Do I want to live to 120? Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on, like, I personally, I would be happy to work for longer than, 65. Like, I really like my job. I really, could see myself doing this for a very long time, even in just like a professor role. Like right now I teach at Tufts University, and, there's a guy that comes around, he's since retired from surgery, but he just kind of helps out and does lectures, and he's not in his prime anymore, but certainly adds value to the educational experience. And I think that that's something that, when I'm in my 80s, I could see myself gaining a lot of enjoyment from that. So personally, from a financial perspective, yes, is it going to be very difficult to withhold that amount of money for that long? I think it would be, but if you're continuing to work, theoretically,
sure.
With compound interest, it's just going to be something that makes it, I would just work less. I would work because I enjoy working, not because I have to work.
And I'll tell you, just as a sample size, I got a sample size of 2, mom and dad, right? So mom did this, what I do, and she really, I mean, if you want to say retired, she retired. She's 80. They're both 86. They got divorced when I was in 3rd grade. So mom retired, if you will, maybe 5-6 years ago, 80-ish. Dad retired when he was 56. He was a Wall Street guy. You put these 2 in the same room, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, you think they're 20 years apart. He wasn't using it, He wasn't using it. So, even for your longevity, you got to keep the muscle, right? Because all muscles you got to exercise.
Exactly. Yeah. I could see myself like taking off like maybe 3 months, but I can't see myself just sitting around doing nothing for the entire, like what am I going to do when I'm 80 years old? I think that's something that if I don't have work, I'm going to find some other form of enjoyment. And I think that that's something that a lot of the longevity people will talk about. A lot of these people who are living past 100 have something that they're invested in. And that may be something that biotech could help with. Maybe there's some sort of physiologic process that's happening that could keep your brain sharp enough during those years without you having to do that. But for right now, I mean, just find something that you like to do, right?
Right. Whether you're Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger, it doesn't matter. You're living and you're getting it done and you're making billions for a lot of people, or
Hmm.
whatever. I have
Hmm.
these conversations all day long when I do my, my work, my executive recruitment work. And I talk to guys and girls in their, late 50s, early 60s, and they're like, Steve, I'm kind of getting pushed out, but I got a lot to give. I want to do fractional work and I can't just turn the light switch off. Exactly what we're talking about. And
Hmm.
they don't want to, you know, they want to work smart. They work smarter, not harder. They want to show the young folks how to do it. They're not looking for a huge paycheck. They're not going to kill anybody to get to the top of the ladder because, I'm good. I don't need that. I just need to do good work and I want to get paid. They don't even want to get paid market rate. They just want to get something, they're not really that worried. So I don't know. There's a market out there for that too. I just don't
Hmm.
know. Companies aren't big fans of it, but I don't know. They're not going to hire them full time, which is fine. These folks would take their hourly things. They'd be off the book, but I'm not sure. I've thought about it a million times and I haven't been able to crack it.
Do you think the workforce is going to change at all in the biotech industry with the advent of artificial intelligence and things like that? Is that something that you are considering?
Well, so yeah, I've been looking at that a lot, and folks ask me about AI and I talk to obviously a lot of technology leaders about AI and I think that I think we're out over our skis, out over the front of our skis on AI. I think that AI, we're putting too much in the AI basket yet, right? I mean, will we get there? Sure, we'll get there, but I think that we're thinking it's going to do too much today for us. And I feel when I talk to my technology leaders that they're getting pushed from their COOs, CEOs, CFOs because they hear about it from their buddies from somewhere, wherever, the club or the golf course or something, that they're using it to make money. And they're not. There's not a ton of use cases. It's doing some cool stuff. It's correlating some data and it's helping with, processing a ton of data and finding things in EMR and EHR data that they couldn't find before, things like that, which is awesome. Great stuff. Is it going to do more? Yeah. Can it do a ton more than that? Is it replacing like they're talking, like they're talking about replacing folks? It's not right now. It's reviewing contracts, it's doing procurement processes, whatever, things like that, which again is huge. It's making us smarter. It's taking that 20 minutes every day or 2 hours every day, whatever your number is on doing maybe some of these slide decks or maybe some of that data analysis or writing some of those emails or writing some of those white papers or whatever it is, um, but it's not replacing. I think it's not going all the way through the process yet. Will it get there? Yeah, probably. But so I think AI in our industry, I think it's going to help a ton on that research side, right? I mean, that's however many 10-year process, right? If you knock a year off that with your AI, I mean, that's huge. They're spending so much
Hmm.
money on this stuff. So,
Hmm.
they've been using it. They're trying to use it on the commercial side, for their different, patient level data and things like that, demographic, geographic, so on and so forth. And it works. It works great, but I think AI, we're all going to keep, trying it and pushing it, into different corners and, it's not going to stop, which is good. I think, innovation.
Yeah, I
Innovation.
mean, I think that it's definitely going to make us more productive, which I'm really looking forward to. I think that's something that a lot of people are talking about. It'll give us more free time back. There's so much administrative work that's required to be a citizen in 2025. Like, hopefully that will help with, a lot of that. I mean, just like researching, where to go out to eat or something like that. If I have like 3 different qualifications, then it takes me 10, 15 minutes to find the right restaurant. Hopefully AI can do something like that. So I'm really
Right.
looking forward to the assistant level AI coming out. But especially in biotech, what I see is like what you're talking about with the research perspective. Maybe one researcher could do the work of 10 people. And does
Sure.
that change the calculus for the workforce? Number one. And then also just like more broadly, I wanted to ask you, independently of how, the workforce is changing, but how does the US stack up in regards to other countries? I I have had some other biotech leaders on, and especially in the longevity space, they will move to Europe to pursue some of these more fringe research ideas, because longevity, I'm sure that is it's not exactly clear cut in that you have a problem, you do a FDA clinical study, and then you publish your data, and then you bring a product to market. It's much more different than that, right? And so they're going to Europe. Are we still number one when it comes to biotech? Is Europe more advantageous from a regulatory standpoint? What is your perspective on that?
I think I don't think there's any one area that's more advantageous than another. I mean, the FDA is the FDA. So if you're going to, the the holy grail is the U.S. from a financial perspective, and economic incentive kind of runs the whole show, whatever the show is. So we are the ones where I'm just bottom line it. We're the ones where everybody makes their money, and they try and come here. So if they're already selling their products, or they have a product somewhere in Europe, they open up something here. And I've helped a lot of companies come here and open up, their office in New York City or Boston or whatever, or Philadelphia. And then they start selling their product here. They commercialize here. And this is where they want to be, because this is where they can make money. So from that perspective, I think that there is no substitute for us on that front. As far as innovation and those kinds of things, I don't know. I still believe that, we're high on that list, but I can't say for certain, but I would say we are, just because people usually go where the money is, right? So it is. I mean, again, it's simple economics and math for just humans, So,
Yeah.
and corporations in general, because they got to survive and they want to thrive. And if they want to thrive, they've got to get something sold in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Do you see a lot more executives coming from other countries trying to come here, or do you see a lot of more executives from the U.S. trying to go out?
It's interesting you say that, because I do see some that go out, but for the most part, I see them coming this way. I just was chatting with a woman over in Tokyo who she's helping a bunch of companies come here to the U.S. They're small little biotechs, and she's in my business, and she helps them get involved with, they hit the, geographically with close to them, which is California, which is fine. But yeah, no, I see them coming here again for the same kind of reason. They see the funding, they see the money, they see the size of the market, and they know that, we've got a structure in place, with our FDA and such, with our approval processes, and they can, it's as predictable as it gets, right? I don't know whether the other Japanese or EU, regulatory bodies are as predictable as the FDA. Again, nothing's a perfect science, but it's as close as we can get. But I see them coming here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I would guess my question though is that, when you see a lot of people coming here, we know that the U.S. at large is a great opportunity for people. Are there certain centers that are doing better than others? So I know Kendall Square is known as this center for biotech, right? And I know
Correct.
Silicon Valley is the center for technology. Where are people moving to? And what would you say are like the top areas that biotechnology can be done with successfully?
Well, so, I mean, it's no mystery, I don't think, that, companies like that, whether they're technology companies, whether they're biotech companies, they're going to go to, one of a few different places. And most of that has to do with the schooling in the area. I mean, Cambridge is a hotbed, right? Great minds come out of there. I mean, you got Harvard, you got Northeastern. I went to BU, and I remember when Northeastern back in the day was a completely different school, and they've done phenomenal. I mean, just amazing stuff coming out of there. But anyway, yeah. So they go towards the schools, they go towards those areas. So you got San Fran area, you got San Diego. San Diego's a ton of R&D, just like Cambridge is, right? But I think San Diego is less mature because they haven't had as many commercial successes come out of there, not yet. I would have said the same thing about Cambridge maybe 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, not because the big ones are here in our area, right? You got J&J, you got all the big companies here, the big commercial. And whenever there was a need for somebody that understood the whole commercial side of things up in Cambridge years ago, they'd have to come down here and grab somebody and pull them up there. That's changed, right? There's more commercial understanding, taking a drug to market up there now. So, they're able to find those folks. San Diego, not as much. I don't even see a demand a whole heck of a lot coming out of San Diego, at least not yet, for the folks that know commercials. So they're going to be less mature than either one. And then I'd say San Fran's right in the middle. So, I'd say those 4 areas: San Francisco, San Diego, Boston area, and our area. You're starting to see some out of the Philadelphia area, too, and a little bit more out of Chicago. Chicago's making a run at it as well, But again, they tend to follow the schools. I'm surprised that I don't see more, and I know there's less than a handful. I'm surprised I don't see more in like the Pittsburgh area. I don't know if it's their geography, but they got Carnegie Mellon there, and there's pretty smart folks doing out of there. I know that in Pittsburgh there's a ton of technology. It's in the last 15 years, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, they all have huge offices there. So you would think that biotech would be there, but there's only a few of them, so I thought there'd be more.
Yeah, they've really made a name for themselves in robotics. I feel like that's something that Pittsburgh has been known for. I visited a few robotics companies that were doing pretty amazing things over there.
Oh, really?
But yeah. So there's this transition to telerobotics, which is like, an operator that is controlling a robot and that allows them to pilot a sub in irradiated waters or something like that. And so there was people that were trying to make apparatuses that you could put into a submarine that was built for humans, but that a human could pilot it far ways away, So
cool.
So that was something that was really of personal interest to me. Personally, I've always been interested in science fiction. And when I think of, robots, I think of like the big suits that you put on that allow you to be super strong and everything like that. And from a surgical perspective, what I want, just like I was telling you, is that, as my body breaks down, I would love to have some sort of exoskeleton that allows me to operate for longer. That's been the goal of surgical robotics for a long time, but it really has not kept pace with surgical skill. Like I can do a surgery much faster with my hands than I can with a surgical robot, So it's just something that I have a personal interest in. Yeah.
Now, how about, let me ask you a question then. Just on that, and accuracy is going to be the same then, right?
Between the human in regards to surgical robotics versus hands, yes. I mean, I think that I have yet to find a paper that says that surgical robotics are better. What is better is that they're able in surgical robotics to make a smaller incision and get into places that are a little bit more difficult than the human body can get into. And so under that understanding, it is technically better, but realistically, in my opinion, the biggest threat to someone's life in surgery is the amount of time that you're under anesthesia. So if you have like a 3-hour procedure versus a 6-hour procedure, a 3-hour procedure is inherently safer. And so when you have the ability to do things fast and efficiently, that's going to always be the gold standard. And so right now, a human being is able to operate at a level that a surgical robot will not be able to. And we're talking about telerobotics, right? We're talking about something that is like a video game controller where it's a human controlling it. We're not talking about like a robot doing it completely independently, which does exist in certain fields. There are, there's a company here that has a dental implant company where they, once you have a tooth removed, a robot completely independently of a human being could actually place that implant. And that's not something that I think exists in surgery yet, outside of that one isolated thing. But to me, it seems like it's like a huge jump in control, right? It's not something that I think that a human being would want to have a robot do it completely independently without any human intervention.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be too comfortable there.
Yeah. I don't think I'm not there yet either. But I am pretty excited about I want surgical robotics to be to be something that is as good or better than a human being operating, just because that would allow me to operate for much longer. And Pittsburgh has become the center of robotics. So I wanted to see what it was that they were creating, because once it comes out for industry, it's going to be a few years later before it gets into medicine,
Sure. Yeah.
So that was one of the reasons why I went back to Pittsburgh. But we're coming short on our time, so I did want to ask you one question.
Sure.
So it's really two questions. Number one, if you had a young person that wanted to become a biotech executive, how would you steer them in the right direction? And then also, if you had someone like me who was like a surgeon and wanted to transition into biotechnology, like let's say if I hurt my hands and, I wanted to do something more on the industry side from a biotech perspective, how would I make that transition?
Well, so the first thing I do in my business when I'm talking to a company or I'm talking to an individual, and this is both on the individual side, I call it drivers. I always find out what their motivation is. What do they like, right? Because what do they want to do? Where do they want to go? What are their thoughts on that? Because, you could talk to somebody about what's best or what's hot or what's going or what's good, but to really get into their mindset, so somebody, I'll give you an example. My daughter, right? She goes to school in Pittsburgh. She's at University of Pittsburgh, right? So she's studying data science and she's studying analytics, and, she's really, really into, demographic data, geographic data, all this data, and I started talking to her about how biotech companies, when they go commercial, they really need to understand their clients, or their patients, right? Then they need to understand the doctors, then the providers. Then they need to understand the competition, right? So they need to understand all that stuff. So, and she just loves looking at the numbers and the data and all that stuff. So I understood her driver. So I got her involved with the company, or had her talk to some folks that we knew at a company that supplies a lot of the data and does a lot of the analytics and things like that, right? So that's one avenue. A surgeon, you'd talk to them about, well, let's talk about, what you enjoyed the most. Obviously, like you said, maybe your hands aren't where they need to be. Maybe you would get more on the science side. Maybe you'd be more in the lab with some folks. It just depends on what your drivers were earlier on, so before you got into surgery, right? So it all depends on the individual, and likewise on the flip side, the companies, I do the same thing. What do you need? What are you looking for? And they're all different shapes and sizes, and they all need something different. And a lot of times, both individuals and companies, and then this is true for anything, not just what I do. They don't understand. Sometimes they don't know what they really want. It doesn't say when you walk into a car dealership, you know exactly what car you want. You got to go through all that, or what sport coat you want when you walk into Brooks Brothers, whatever. But that's why everything comes in different shapes and sizes and colors, right? Because we don't know yet what we need and what we want, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I guess my question is, I know many people that have made the jump, right? Like they're disgruntled with medicine. They feel like they're not able to provide the care that they really want. And then they make this jump. What are the skills that you would recommend them learn so that they could make that transition and come at a competitive level, not starting from an entry level position?
Yeah, well, so that's a tough one again, because I don't know where they want to go, right? What they want to do. But if they were coming into, so a lot of what we do is technology, right? So if they wanted to make the jump into technology, let's talk about your ability to process that data. Let's talk about what data makes you, drives you the most. If it's a surgeon, it's probably going to be somebody involved with that scientific data more in the R&D side, right? So understand. Get involved with some of that data and really trying to figure out how you can help a company. Whether you're helping them get that data right. Because going all the way back, we didn't really touch on this real hard. Anything having to do with AI, you're dead in the water if you don't have the right data coming in. You're done. You're not even getting out of bed in the morning, right? So. So, the hottest thing right now is all that data, right? And trying to make sense of all that data, and then trying to get that data to a point where these models can use it, right? So maybe somebody has a propensity to deal with and help to collate and curate some of that EMR and EHR data. They can help a company understand how they're coding all this, how they're putting it together, how they're making it, maybe the governance around that data, right? The security around it. Like, can we do this? Can this go here? Can that go there? There's so many different things. It's really, really tough to say what somebody can do and where they can go because it's such a big field. Everything, there's just, I'm sorry I'm being slippery on it, but it's just, there's no straight line,
Yeah. No, I hear you. It's very interesting when I hear people that have made the jump, but I don't think there's any rhyme or reason to it. I think that they just got disgruntled with medicine and then made the jump. And so
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just as a global sort of disgruntled thing, I mean, everything I read right now, just people in general, in their current situations are, I think I read 63% disgruntled or unhappy. We're at an all-time high on that. So I don't know what that means or what's going to happen here in the near future, but that's a big number.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly something that I'd feel the sentiment specifically in my own field. There's a lot of people who are just kind of burnt out with medicine, and that's something that I think a lot of it comes from, the commercialization of what many people feel is a calling, and you're tasked with being hyper productive for doing things that at a pace that you feel like you don't want to do it at. You want to kind of slow down your pace, and so that's the thing with surgery is that everything is meant to become more efficient, to become more faster, to get more procedures done to increase your bottom line. And so that's something that I think a lot of surgeons are exiting the field and going into fields like biotech where they can still contribute, still feel like they're doing good in the world, which is what brought them into the field in the first place.
So I had no idea. I had no clue how much they drive surgeons, how much they could put. I mean, I had an aortic aneurysm. This is way more than you need to know, right? I had it repaired last February, a year ago February.
Okay.
I've been monitoring it for 15 years. I used a surgeon in New York City at Cornell, right? When I got this thing done, you got to do your laps. You got to walk around. I'm there for a week. He had 11 people at any one time. This one surgeon that he was been operating on, 11 people during a week. And I got my bill. It's a big bill. So the P&L on this guy is gigantic. If he's doing that all year long, that's insane. Yeah, exactly. Right. And I'm seeing him at 11 at night and I'm seeing him at 6:30 in the morning,
Absolutely. No,
he's there 6 to 8.
Yeah, it's truly a calling, right? You have to really love that stuff. And like, I like being in the hospital. I like being in like the mix with all that stuff. But it can become tiresome, and that's why I see a lot of people making this jump. But listen, I want to end on a positive note. I feel like there's so many biotechnology breakthroughs that are happening, and part of the podcast is I ask all of my guests general questions at the end. And I know we touched on this a little bit, but the first question that I always ask is, where do you see your industry in 10 years? What do you think that the biotech industry is going to look like?
I think the biotech industry, I mean, earlier we talked about economic incentive, and there's a lot of economic incentive for both investors and everybody involved with biotech. There's economic incentive in there. I think the government is trying, trying to bring prices down, but they're gonna kill innovation if they do that. So I don't think it's going to change a whole heck of a lot than where it is today. From that perspective, right? They're going to try and bring prices down, but they're going to bring prices down. They're going to squash innovation. So I think biotech, to hit on what you and I were, so structurally, I don't think the macro picture is going to change much. On more of a micro level, I think AI is going to just become more and more embedded in our industry. And I think it's going to be for the better. I think it's going to be great stuff. They're going to be punching out medicines that are going to help so many different ailments, in a great way. I mean, these immuno-oncology drugs, there's several of those companies doing that right now on the gene therapy side. And then there's others that aren't even on the gene therapy side doing immuno-oncology drugs, which is just phenomenal. And the response rates that some of these candidates get, I had so anyway, I won't get into a personal story there, but I think that AI is going to be in our industry a lot more, and it's going to make us a lot better and a lot smarter and a lot faster.
Do you think it's going to continue to be dominated by big companies like Pfizer and GSK and all these other big companies, or is it going to be much more egalitarian, like, Silicon Valley 30 years ago, where people in their garage were making companies?
Well, listen, they have so much money. It's hard to get past that, and they're just paying up for these companies. Horizon was bought by Amgen for close to 30 billion out of Ireland a couple years ago, and they have 1.7 billion in revenue. That's a big number. You got a lot of promise coming in that. So who's going to compete with that? At least right now. Do I think it's going to remain that way? Well, if they waste money, it won't remain that way. It's really tough for a company. Let's look at one that I do a lot of work with. I've done a lot of work with Regeneron, right? Worked with them for 16 years. I've placed 70 plus folks there. When I started working with them, they I don't even know if they had any revenue. If they did, it was a couple $100 million, and there was less than 1,000 people. Now they've got 10 plus billion in revenue and 14,000 employees. It's tough for companies to do that. Their two founders had put the Regeneron clause in each one of their partnerships, because that's how a lot of these companies need to start, because they don't have the supply chain. They don't have the commercial, right? Like we just talked about with Pfizer and J&J and Novartis and Merck. So they had almost a poison pill clause. If some of these other biotechs are that successful with getting drugs passed, but also that successful with with their poison pill clauses effectively, then there will be more that grow. But that's a big company, and there's not a lot of that I see here or coming. A lot of them talk about, half jokingly, being bought out by some of the big guys. That's part of I don't want to say the goal, but that's in the equation, I guess I should say, right? It's in the calculus as they move
Absolutely,
forward.
yeah. It's sometimes an exit strategy for people, right?
It is. Yeah.
But anyway, I feel like we could talk about the industry for a while, but I did want to ask you, other than your area of expertise, which is biotech, what is the technology that technological breakthroughs are happening all the time? What are you looking at in the news or maybe in your own personal life that you're super interested in that may not be something that is closely associated with your field? Like for me, it's robotics. Like I can't wait until I can have a robot that can do my laundry and wash my dishes. So I'm always watching what the next robotic breakthrough is, even though it doesn't really have too much of an association with my field. What about you?
Well, so, I mean, we talked about the wearables, right? I think that's really, really cool stuff. I mean, I love that stuff because the way I got involved, unfortunately, with my aortic aneurysm was I used to do a lot of exercise. I'm getting back on the bike now since I got repaired, but that's why I want to monitor my glucose and monitor my sleep and monitor my heart rate and all that stuff. So that to me, I think is the coolest stuff here and coming. And once we can, it seems it's a little disjointed right now, these things, but I think that they're getting more cohesive. And I think that we're starting to get to the point where we can take pictures of what we're eating, and then that just gets all calibrated in there too, which is awesome stuff. And I guess you probably do, some of the same stuff. But I think for me, that's the coolest, newest, greatest stuff, quite frankly.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that it's something that I'm personally interested in, and I can't wait until we can track every little thing so that we can modify our lifestyle to be the healthiest version of ourselves. And
right.
So I feel like we're close to it.
I think us as Americans in our country, what we eat and what we're allowed to eat, right? That's different, right? The FDA lets a few things through that other countries are like, whoa, you guys eat that? I mean, Mountain Dew, let's start there and then let's keep going, right? But monitoring that stuff, looking at that stuff, understanding what's going into your system and that it's going to sit in maybe some of your organs for a long time, is kind of probably good information to have, so.
Absolutely. Yeah. More information is better. I think that we can all agree with that. So nice to speak with you, Steve.
As long as we can synthesize, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So nice to speak with you, Steve. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really got a lot of insight from the biotech industry, even though it's just a couple streets down. I don't have people as tuned in as you are from more of a global perspective, because you're doing hiring, you're placing people, and you've also seen it for a very long time. So thank you so much for that. And then tune into Steve's podcast, which is Biotech Bites. It's very important and very informative, and feel free to also follow us on a regular basis. If you don't mind hitting the like and subscribe button, we would really appreciate it. And for those of you guys who are following us on a regular basis, thank you so much for all of your support. And as always, we will see you again in the future. Thanks, everybody.
We appreciate you taking part in today's episode. Take this chance to reimagine a better future by joining a community of futurists who strive for a remarkable world. Be a part of this growing network and contribute to making the world a more positive place. Visit thefuturistsociety.net and subscribe to the show so you don't miss a drop of hopeful futurism.